we show women not only as listening to experts, but also providing their opinion, their expert point of view, to make sure we provide an equal representation, not only in numbers, but also in the roles that women and men can play in a conversation like that. We need to provide a gender perspective. I already mentioned about this, and there will be probably a number of things that may sound very similar. Everything that we do will have a gender perspective because we are individual human beings and we all have genders. So we need to make sure that we, as much as possible, embed the gender perspective in the communication materials to make sure that we are gender responsive. And we need to present diverse roles for men and women. That means it's not only about men doing the expert conversation and women being on the side. One thing that is very important for gender responsive communications in government is we need to give space to women in leadership positions. We need to make sure that we give them equal visibility. We provide them with equal and balanced space. If we are going to talk in an interview, in a documentary, to male experts, we need to make sure that we also provide a similar amount of time to women's experts in different topics. And we need to present different perspectives. And the perspective, when we do manage to include all the perspective, we will have a more balanced final product. So let us make sure that we keep this into consideration. A number of things also have been mentioned, and we will continue to mention them throughout the day because this is very important. We tend to forget, again, sometimes even ourselves working for even women have our own biases and we forget to consider certain aspects, certain things, and we're here to also question ourselves. So let us make sure that we challenge gender stereotypes, give equal visibility to women and men in leadership roles, portray all genders as equals in a positive manner, a respectful manner. I already mentioned this. We need to be mindful of gender relations and stereotypes when portraying individuals. Let us say, for instance, that we present a story about a specific case, and we are, again, stereotyping how men or women should react or should respond or what I expected to say. We had the example of the COVID case when where the advertisement showed women only doing housework and men is resting. Well, we know that is reality, that happens often in reality. We also understand that we need to make sure that when we portray these situations, we also need to aim for a more equal and balanced distribution of care work at home, and also understanding, as Tess mentioned, I think all the colleagues mentioned, that women were also on the front lines, not only at home doing housework, but also on the front lines responding to the pandemic as doctors, as nurses, as police officers, etc. In a number of ways, it was a very, very important moment for women. So we do agree that there are biases, and we need to make sure that we analyze and question these communication materials if we want to move towards a more gender responsive communication. We need to, again, avoid portraying certain jobs or roles as more appropriate for a specific gender. I mean, there's no jobs, basically, and job titles are gender neutral. There's no jobs for women, jobs for men. There are jobs, and this is the way we should refer to those jobs. So let us keep that in mind. We need to avoid associating any gender to a specific appearance, trait, or behavior. That means, and again, it's about avoiding the stereotypes of, for instance, men being strong, men being not showing emotions, or women being more fragile, more weak, more submissive. We need to avoid those stereotypes because they continue to be, in many instances, communication continue to portray women and men in those manners. So we need to make sure that we always keep an eye open to challenge those stereotypes. Piece of advice here is keep your communications diverse. When producing any communication materials, always consider gender, but also socioeconomic background, ethnicity, race, religion, age, sexual orientation, ability. One of the colleagues at the beginning was mentioning about religion. It's very important when we produce communication materials, It's not only about making sure that we balance representation between women and men, but also there's many other experiences that individuals have in their life. And we need to make sure as we present different aspects, different genders, that we also portray a diversity in roles. My colleague Tricia will show some examples about it later on, but I just want to mention that this brings us to the conversation of intersectionality, whereas many multiple identities or experiences of individuals intersect. And so we need to make sure that we bring different perspectives, and when we are doing, let's say, a story, we need to show people from different religions, different economic backgrounds, different political movements, different religions, different gender identities. We need to make sure that we are diverse. And this is advice that will also help your communication to be more accessible for all the audiences, and also will be, hopefully, that will also help improve its gender responsiveness. We can only contribute to gender equality if we consider, include, and respond to the different experiences and identities of people from different groups. So this is already what I mentioned. We need to use visuals and expressions that highlight personal differences, and any form of discrimination, let us remember this, has a gender dimension. So even if you are a wealthy person, let's say a wealthy woman, and then you are of a majority, considered majority, let's say religious group, you can still face discrimination because you are a woman. And the same goes for men. You could be a person who belongs to a lower socioeconomic class, from a minority group, ethnic group, and then you can still face discrimination. In this case, it's not going to be because you're a man, but because you have other experiences, other identities that put you in that condition. So you need to make sure that always, as a communicator, you need to make sure to always keep in mind that your audience there's a diversity in the audience, and there's a diversity in the subjects we interview and then we deal with for our communication products. So we need to bring those diverse perspectives to those products. Gender-sensitive language is something we will be discussing a number of times today, but I just want to say a few things. Language influences thoughts and shapes gender roles, and therefore carries a great potential for achieving gender equality. It plays a crucial role in the formation of thoughts and behaviors and the construction of reality about gender. So we need, in very practical terms, there's some examples here on the screen that you can look at. We don't, for instance, we advise to avoid the use of male and female, because that refers to the reproduction capacity, and also it's a term for biology and science. So we actually favor the use of men and women, man and woman, when we're talking about, let's say, parliamentarians, or politicians, or migrant workers, or refugees, or we need to make sure that we are using, hopefully, the terms man and woman, and we need to also avoid gender terms. I mentioned before, professions have no gender. There should be gender neutral, and we need to make sure that we avoid this kind of let's say, there's some examples on the screen, like chairman, congressman, businessman, policeman. There are alternatives for absolutely all these words, and if you cannot think of one, you can always Google quickly something, and there will be an answer for you. There's always an alternative that is gender neutral, that is more respectful, more inclusive, and therefore it will make your communication more accessible, and people will feel, no one will feel excluded. The key thing is to think, if I write this term, maybe some people will feel excluded, they will not feel part of it. So let's make sure that we think of the audience as we produce communication. One thing that we want to emphasize here is, and we used it in a first interpersonal relationships, is when you don't know the gender of the person that you're talking about, refer to them as they. They or them is a respectful way. You don't know if the person is a man or is a woman, or it identifies as a different gender identity. So it is a good advice, a good practice to use they or them. And we need to avoid forms of address that label a woman in regard to her relationship to a man. There's a very famous case of a Nobel Prize a couple of years ago, that when a couple, married couple, man and woman, won the prize, for one of the Nobel Prizes, I think in science, and then the headlines were about the man and his wife won the Nobel Prize, which is very disrespectful to the woman who had a very, the same amount of work in achieving that prize. So we need to make sure that we don't fall into that kind of mistakes. And again, it's about and I always discuss this with my colleagues. It's not that people have bad intentions. It's not that people want to really do any harm. It's just, this is the way we've been brought up, and this is the default manner in addressing these issues. So let's make sure that we bring that kind of let's say, questioning to the work that we do, and then assure you it will start making a difference in the actual impact and outcome of the conversation. One thing that is super important is we need to use facts over judgments. And this means we need to avoid personal opinions, because we are brought up to believe certain aspects of gender relations. It's better to stick to facts. It's better to avoid personal opinions, avoid my personal judgment when I'm describing something. Necessarily, it's better to use factual descriptions. You see, if you are narrating a story about, let's say, a sexual assault case, don't write what you think happened. Just stick to the facts that are officially presented, and you will have a much better result. If you're unsure, you can also use quotes of the individuals, affected by the situation, to avoid having to narrate it, which will also make you will have less chance to put your opinion or your intent, your beliefs into that conversation. Avoid speaking on behalf of people, and this is actually something that happens a lot. You may have heard the term mansplaining, which is something that's very common, that we men tend to do with women. Instances of if you're producing a communication material, make sure that you provide enough space for the women, particularly, to explain themselves, and don't talk or explain on their behalf. And then there's also one thing that is very important. You may not be sure about a certain topic, particularly gender relations, gender aspects, gender equality. When you don't know, just ask an expert. Check with a colleague, check with someone who knows better, check with whoever is around that can give you some light into it. Go and check online. There's plenty of materials that you can always consult. And we're happy to also share some of these presentations so you can have this as a reference for your future work. With this, I want to segue to covering sensitive topics. I know you do communication for the government, but sometimes we do cover sensitive topics in government. I want to highlight one element: avoid visuals that victimize. In any case, whether it's a man or a woman or children, of course, no visual should victimize. Avoid being sensationalist. And make sure that you, again, it's about going back to the principle of treating people with dignity and respect. In that sense, make sure that your subjects are in full understanding and agreement of you featuring them in your story. So practice very well informed consent when you're writing a story, particularly about sensitive topics. And thing that we do apply in the UN communications is the do no harm principle, which means if a story or featuring a person will actually cause any harm to the person because they're going to be in a situation of distress, that's going to put them in danger, that's going to create any kind of pressure for them in their lives, then we don't do it. Do no harm always as you practice your communications. It's a good way to go to make sure that we respect and we don't affect individuals, we don't cause any trouble for them, we don't put them in trouble in general. So this is something to also consider as general. I want to stop here to say, as we work in communications, it's a continuous process, as I said that earlier today. Review, analyze, and repeat, but make it gender responsive every time, more and more. And that includes, as you produce your communications, review and analyze your content to assess how gender responsive is it, and keep in mind the language you use, the images you choose, the type of messages that you convey. Check out who is sending the message and who is receiving it. Mostly, with social media, we have a big advantage. We can review analytics and see who is the audience, who is paying attention, who's listening, who is who is clicking, who is sharing, etc. So pay attention to who's on the other side, on the receiving end of your communications. And make sure that you break up gender issues. It's not that all your news or all your stories, all your product will be about gender or women's empowerment, but make sure that you bring up and you embed gender into the materials that you're producing in speeches, press releases, stories, documentaries, and so on. So make sure that we keep the conversation going, we keep the topic alive in the agenda. So that's going to be very important. Keep your communication and in general your interaction gender responsive. That means that you should apply some of these principles and what we discussed before on your website, your social media, applications, speeches, any kind of communication materials. Make sure that include gender aspects in speeches, stories, press releases. Ensure gender inclusive language. We saw already a couple of examples. In all instances, it's not only on your formal communications. Make sure that you start applying these rules to your personal life and you see how much that change, the benefit it brings. Avoid manuals. I already mentioned the manuals. Please, when you organize an event, bring experts, voices from different genders, women. There are many very qualified women and people from different gender identities that can come and share their experiences. Women can be way more than presenters, can be resource persons, can be experts, can come and explain complex issues as well as men can do. So let's make sure that we present diverse panels and apply these gender responsive principles to everyday life, interactions, internal and external communications, and to see how things start to change. With this, I finished, but this is not the end of the presentation. My colleague Tricia will now talk about social media.
Hello, magandang umaga po ulit. Ay, medyo malakas. Good morning, everyone. So, during our Mentimeter earlier, a lot of you said that you want to learn about best practices during today's learning exchange. So, from this point, we'll be sharing some of our best practices with you from UN Women's side on social media, and then later this afternoon, Professor Tess will share some best practices from the Philippines naman. So before we start, can we just please have a show of hands? Who among you have personal social media accounts? Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. So sobrang dami, and I think we are part of the majority, no? And then sino naman yung parte ng trabaho nila ang pagmamanage ng social media? Who among you works on social media? Or has social media as part of your work? Okay, not a lot, but the best practices we'll be sharing anyway. They're also applicable to developing other kinds of communications products. So, just to give you a background, social media landscape in the Philippines. So a big majority, 72.5% of the population, are social media users. So this is data from just this year, January 2023. And among the social media users, there's sort of a balance with 53.5% being women and 46.5% being men. So majority of social media users in our country are aged 18 to 34 years old. So Gen Z, early millennial age group. And these users spend 3 hours and 43 minutes on social media daily. I think we're guilty of being on social media longer, no? For pastime, especially now we have YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, it's really easy to just consume. And with all now data is cheaper, we have unlimited data. So it's really, social media has really become accessible. And as we can see, even though majority of users are aged 18 to 34, there are a lot of even infants who are already on social media using YouTube Kids. So, and in Philippines, Facebook is the most used platform. So 95.7% of all internet users. So with all these increased connectivity, social media could perpetuate gender stereotypes. So we talk about this so many times already this morning, but specifically on social media, we tend to show women in traditional roles. So data actually from the Unstereotype Alliance found that in the Philippines, 78% of survey respondents say media in their country typically portray women in traditional roles, while 84% say the same of men. So gender stereotyping, it's not only for women but also for men. Yun na nga, yung diniscuss ni Ma'am Tess kanina na women doing housework and then men being macho. So it's still very evident, and we have data to support that. And then unrealistic beauty standards from skin color to body type. So this is something that's not really new for us. So sa Pilipinas na lang, di ba? Especially decades ago, we tend to glorify or look up to fairer skin complexion. So mas maputi, mas maganda. So kasi sa TV, yun yung madalas natin nakikita na if someone is selling a beauty product, the models are always fair-skinned, they're slim. So, actually, girls begin to lose confidence in their own abilities by the time they reach 6 years old. So, bata pa lang, when they're consuming these products, these communications products, when what they see on TV could affect them as early as 6 years old. And another gender stereotype in social media is gender as binary. So blue, hindi siya masyadong blue sa screen, pero blue yan, blue for men, and pink for women. And also we tend to show na there are only two genders. That while it's true we have two sexes biologically, the gender spectrum is very broad, and we're not touching upon that because it requires another whole day of learning exchange. While social media could perpetuate gender stereotypes, it could also promote gender equality, and we'll be sharing with you some of our practices at UN Women. So first of all, representation matters. It's important to illustrate people from different genders, ages, skin tones, religions, ethnicities, abilities, everything. Of course, we have limitations, no? If we can only illustrate, I don't know, like 3 characters, it's not really possible to show everyone, represent everyone. But as much as possible, we should try. So this is an actual social media post that we posted on our social media accounts for International Literacy Day. So literacy is not, it's not for a specific gender. It's for everyone. Everyone needs to be literate. But for this specific social media post, you'll see that the characters in the card, so we have women of different ages, skin tones, different hair types, and we also have a woman with disability. So it's really important to represent them in the products that we develop. Just imagine na lang if people from minorities, see the products that we are producing, and they will feel included. They'll feel that they actually see us. No, communications professionals see us. So, and we are, although in numbers we are minority, we matter. So it's really important. And literacy, it also has nothing to do with ability, disability, no, but it's always good to feature them. So we have limitations when it comes to this. I know a lot of us rely on Canva. So it's not really easy to find matching, like different characters with similar art direction. Otherwise, the design will look all over the place. But this is something to keep in mind when we work with graphic designers to actually illustrate and when we're reviewing their products. So, paano naman kung hindi tayo nag-illustrate? So we don't use graphic design. This is also applicable when we post photos on social media. For instance, you organize an event and there are different kinds of participants, no? And we share photos of the participants. It's always good to show there are men who attended, women who attended, you know, and if it's even possible, we show the different kinds of ethnicities, religions who also attended. So this is not only applicable for illustrations. So second practice is to feature women in different careers and fields. As we like to say, where is women's place? A women's place is everywhere. So this is a graphic that we developed during FIBA World Cup. So FIFA World Cup, sorry, not a sports fan. So here we featured, these are actual illustrations of actual players. So we featured different ones from different regions in Asia Pacific, with different hair colors, different hair types, skin colors. So, and they're doing sports, they're doing soccer, which is not typically featured on TV. So we see more of men playing sports, and then women are in other kinds of sports. So gender sports is another issue, but in communications, it's always good to feature also women doing unconventional or in professions that are not typically portrayed on social media or TV. So as Diego mentioned earlier, language matters. So globally, not only in the Philippines, patriarchy is deeply rooted in our society, even in our language. So it's really important to use gender-inclusive language, just so everyone feels included. So we won't go through everything, but as Diego mentioned, if you have doubts, if you don't know the correct word for it, there's Google, there's ChatGPT. So yes, language matters. Next practice, we are trying to focus on key messages on women's empowerment, focusing on women making their own choices. So voice, choice, and agency. That should be the focus of our key messages. I think this is from the same report cited by Ms. Tess earlier. So they conducted focus group discussion among Filipino women because it was about a campaign on women being career women. So it was it's sort of the campaigns are encouraging women to work outside the home. Na parang kaya mo yan, kaya din natin to. If kaya nila, kaya natin. Like we can do it. But on the other hand, another group of women said that, but I don't want to work outside the home. I want to focus on my family and dedicate full-time work, doing care work at home. So it's really instilling the message that, it's up to you. If you want to work inside your home or if you want to pursue work outside your home, the choice is yours. So it's not to tell women what they should or should not be doing. So this is, sometimes it just comes out naturally. Sa language nga, di ba? Saan ka nakatrabaho? Wala. Sa bahay lang ako. Sa bahay lang. Like, I'm only staying at home. But care work is not just work. It's, kung walang babae, kung walang mga babae na nagtatrabaho sa bahay, walang sumusuporta sa pamilya nila, what would men who work outside the work do? So, like, women are very vital in doing care work, in also running the economy. So, in the end, the choice should be up to them. Another practice that we do is engaging men and boys, our allies. So women cannot achieve gender equality alone. Gender equality is not only women's issues, it's everyone's issue. So here, this is a quote card that we developed for a gender peacekeeping forum that we just had in Korea. And Commander Tyson Nicholas talked about gender equality and women's empowerment. So there are still, I mean, unfortunately, there are still people who who only listen to men. So, para makaabot tayo, makalabas tayo sa ating echo chambers so that we can reach more audience, it's also good to hear the perspective of men. And when we do this, hopefully, you know, other men will think the same. O, oo nga, like, bilang mga lalaki, it's also our responsibility to promote gender equality wherever we are, at home, in the workplace. And something more practical is to celebrate women. So there are a lot of international days related and not related to women and girls in all their diversity. So something that's very popular even in the Philippines, International Women's Day on March 8th. And I know that in the Philippines, we celebrate actually National Women's Month. So we buong March. So if we're developing something for social media, it's always good to celebrate that, no? And it doesn't always mean that there should be a lot of work around it. Just sa ating mga, in our organization, in our offices, there are already women working. You know, what if we feature their story, hear from their perspective? How is it working for that organization or agency? So there are many practices, but it's always good to just be vocal on social media as well, that we are celebrating women for other companies, organizations to follow. So that's it for today. I think we have a bit of time for questioning. So Tess, Diego, and I are here if you want to direct any of your questions or just share any of your experiences with us.
Anything that resonated with you, anything that you disagree with, anything that you would like to expand on, or anything you would like us to talk more about, if you have any questions. We can also volunteer some of it. It's only a few minutes we have left before lunchtime. I don't know if anyone wants to come in. I don't see any hands. Anyone? Okay.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would just like to commend all the speakers for today's this morning's session. Generally, I get the trope of all the presentations, and yes, what resonated to me most was the alliance between men and women. Somehow, that really should be what we should amplify the most, because we're not really, we should be a team, right? But I also get I'm still baffled by 21st century. There's still those meaning the first image on the women candidates for any positions. I mean, we already had how many prime ministers who were women, right? So it's nothing, there's no surprise to that. We can actually lead. It's proven and tested. So but sometimes the narratives keeps on wrong. So the efforts that we're doing here is somehow, in a way, an effort to remind us that really women have been at the forefront of all of these industries, and that we are really capable to be a partner in nation building and all these world efforts endeavors that's really creating more opportunities for all genders, right? That's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think you have touched on a very, very important point here. It's about we're all partners in this. It's not about women or men or any other gender. It's about we're all here in this together. We all deserve human rights. We all deserve visibility, representation, inclusion, and we need to be mindful of it. Sometimes because the way we've been brought up, society, the way it is built and constructed gender relations in a certain way, we always need to be questioning and checking and reviewing. That's why I mentioned review and analyze your communications work and your everyday life interactions to make sure that you are practicing treating people with respect and dignity, regardless of the gender. I think that is one of the things I would like to hopefully you getting back home and back to your work every day is remembering that we need to treat all individuals with dignity and respect. And I know you do, and I know in most cases when we miss some element of gender or any other kind of representation, it's not because we have a bad intention, it's because we have biases that we built through decades, years of being exposed to messages of advertisements, television, news. So we need to make sure that we, again, assess what we do, review it, analyze it, and bring and try as much as possible to make it gender responsive, inclusive, and a more human, humanly better if it's possible. I don't know if.
Yeah, very important yung men as allies, no? Kasi I also have an advocacy group practicing feminist media and wala namang contention. There's no contention that men and boys are really important in the gender equality work. But honestly talaga, what is parang medyo contentious din, no? Sa development sector, sa women's rights movement, even sa LGBTQI movement. Saan ba? Paano? How do we operationalize men as allies, di ba? Kasi parang how do they not take up space? Parang ganun yung conversation din eh. But parang be a support to the gender equality project. So yun yung mga ganong concerns. Siyempre may concerns din yung women and we need to acknowledge that. Yung mga nasa women's rights movement na parang how to balance, di ba? Yung mga ganong pagbabalance. And it's a constant process of always checking up, di ba? With men, what they want to bring to the table, what can they bring to the table, and also to the sector. No? Kunyari, kung papasukin yung women with disabilities, paano ba yung magiging role ng men doon? So it's always the feedback, the constant conversationing that should happen. So para we can move forward eh. Kasi kung nandun tayo all sa question lagi na parang, o baka mag-take up sila ng space, di ba? And then, you converse with each other. Tapos sa work na ginagawa namin, na-in-explore ko pa, what we find parang an important role of men is in documenting yung parang being the one doing the documentation of parang or doing the work with us on gender-based violence. Kasi doing the work, communication work on gender-based violence really takes a lot of you. You do research or being exposed again and again on these stories of victimization, And parang napansin ko dun within our group, di ko alam, I don't know if this will apply to all men, pero yung men, hindi sila ganun, parang because we don't have the experience of gender-based violence, parang there's less risk of them being traumatized, of experiencing vicarious trauma, of having compassion fatigue. Pero syempre, nagde-debrief din kami sa team. So parang that's one practical way of bringing men into the work of supporting women into bringing their stories. No? So yun, constant conversation, that's what works for us. And then on the point, yung maganda yung point mo na parang yung role of women in society, ano naman talaga siya, it's always been there, di ba? Hindi lang, ang problem dito, hindi siya nasa surface, di ba? Sabi ko nga sa mga estudyante ko lagi, hindi totoo na media reflects reality. Di ba? May pagganon pa ako. Media reflects power relations in society. Diba? And the power relations in society, may inequalities talaga. There are those who have a voice, who are visible, who have a space in the conversation. And what we do as communicators is to reflect what we want, di ba? What we want, the alternative vision of what we want to be reflected in media and communications.
Thank you so much. We have another comment, couple of comments on this table in the middle. Microphone is coming.
Hello. Yeah, I have two questions actually. Number one, it really frustrates me that even though it is a fact that 5% was it of the total amount of budget of a certain government agency is dedicated for gender and development, am I correct? But we still see a lot of communication materials, which is, what do you call this, degrading to women in some sense. I was just wondering on your end as the gender experts, what do you think is the problem? Is it legislation? Is it inclusive? Is it including it into the policy? And second, sorry, I just at least it's done. With Nam from UN Women, I'm sorry, I forgot. Sorry, with Nam from UN Women, Ma'am, every government agencies with women who are in position, be it undersecretary, assistant secretary, if people or social media users are not in agreement with what they say, there's always the gender-based attacks. There are pictures of them in bathing suits, even for example, clerks from the front end of that. What are the things that Philippine Commission on Women do to address all of those things, or where can we go to actually report as such? Because I also attended the MIL event. There are a lot of attacks on different platforms specific to women, and I was just wondering what all of us here can do to address all of those things. Thank you.
I have a little bit of a reflection on the first question. I think there's not a single answer, there's not a single solution. I think it's a mix of approaches. I think we start with this exercise that we're having today by exchanging what we know, what we apply in our daily work with you, and also hear from you how do you apply also these gender events to your communities. I think that's a good starting point. But of course, legislation, policy, conversation, continuous self-assessment is very helpful. And also bringing, I don't repeat this enough. If we aim and if we apply this principle of treating everyone with dignity and respect as communicators, we have a big tool, a big capacity to actually start changing things. So that would be my first reflection. I pass to Professor Tess to
Ang hirap naman ng tanong. Yung first question na, ano pa yun? Hindi ko alam na ano pala to, comprehensive examination. Yung muna second question, kasi yung mas madaling na. So, what you were saying, ma'am, are examples of gender disinformation, no? Lalo na sa mga political leaders, because it serves to invalidate, no? Their personhood and their capabilities as a leader. So, dito sa Philippines, meron tayong tinatawag na gender ombud. Sige nga, sino dito who here knows who is, what institution is the gender ombud in the Philippines? May Christmas package daw. Wala. Okay. Ang gender ombud po ng Pilipinas ay ang Commission on Human Rights of the Philippines. That is stipulated in the implementing rules and regulations of the Magna Carta of Women. So kung yung PCW, ang role niya is to mainstream yung gender equality and women's empowerment. Ang gender ombud monitors and evaluate yung mga ganitong class, yung implementation. So if there is violations ng mga ganito, ang magiging katrabaho po natin, I think based on what I know, is yung gender ombud, which is the Commission on Human Rights. Okay, dun sa first question, yung mahirap, sige. I think marami siyang factors. Tama, I concur with Diego that it's really a lot of factor, no? Number one, siguro let's put everything into context. it is only in 1930 when women enjoyed the right to vote. Prior to that, may panahon nga pag-aari pa tayo ng mga kalalakihan. We were owned by men, di ba? Di ba? During the, ano ba yung mga napapanood natin? Yung Bridgerton, di ba? In Netflix. That's an era. Kailan lang yun? 1800s when we were owned by men. So, let's put into context naman, di ba? Kasi it's important to recognize the challenges and the pushback and the resistance, but it's also important to really acknowledge the gains that we have achieved so far. So, yon. Number one is put into context. For me, ang laki na rin talaga ng naiusad natin, no? From that status of being women being owned by men, being subhuman, ang laki na ng ating naging progress. Number two, I think yung problem sa communications is, I don't know if you will agree, but communication work in the Philippines, in development, in governance, parang lagi siyang ad phone. Hindi siya ganun ka-important. Nakukugot lang. Di ba? Parang, oh sige, okay na lahat. Tapos, comes work. Parang lagi siyang add-on. So, it's really not at the forefront of yung policy making when it comes to gender. How do we frame the message, di ba? How do we make sure that we are transforming how we see gender relationships? Kasi that's what we do as communicators, No, we reimagine, no? We transform how the status quo is communicated, is relayed to people. So, yun. Ano pa ba yung next? Okay. So, number three, yung pushback and resistance. Alam naman natin na for the longest time, napasa yung Magna Carta of Women, may safe spaces doon na tayo, na-repeal yung mga sexist provisions sa anti-rape law, nagkaroon ng anti-bawsi law, napasa yung RHL. So for the longest time, happy tayo, di ba? Oo, gender equality sa Pilipinas, ang taas natin sa rankings ng gender equality. Tapos, na-reveal na, hindi pa pala. Parang there's so much misogyny and sexism in the society. So, yun, merong pushback, may resistance. Pero I guess ako, medyo optimistic ang tao. I see that as gaining ground. Kasi if there's pushback, di ba, nagkakaroon, yung power creates it's resistant. So if you are gaining power, then magkakaroon at magkakaroon talaga ng resistance. And of course, that brings me to the last point na parang because of those na may power brings resistance, ibig sabihin our end towards gender equality and women's empowerment will not end. Yun pala yung message. Kung maka-continue siya, di ba? It's a never ending, pero syempre gusto natin. Pero I don't think we will experience that. No, yung ganun. Pero it's a never ending work of changing the world, medyo Miss Universe, Michelle. Yeah. Changing the world to the vision of the reality that we want today.
Just to add to Prof. Tess's response to the second question, it's online gender-based violence or online attacks are very tricky, no? Kasi because of anonymity, it's not easy to make perpetrators accountable. So this is where outreach, advocacy, education really comes into play. And I'll do a short plug, no, that starting November 25, we will start the 16 days of activism against gender violence, gender-based violence. So it's a 16-day-long campaign, as the name implies, where we raise awareness on different kinds of gender-based violence, including online ones. So in the Philippines, I'm not gonna reveal too much details yet, but we will be working with certain personalities to have a wider reach, to inform more Filipinos that there are kinds of violence that are usually experienced by specific genders, and that gender-based violence is not always physical. It could be emotional, it could be online. So this is where, as communications professionals, we can expand our work to also do some advocacy. So we are already going to do something in the Philippines. And if we could get your support in disseminating those messages, the campaign materials, that would be really helpful for us and for everyone. Thank you.
One final question and then.
Hello again. I am Jazz and I work with BTV. So I would like to express our appreciation for these kinds of seminars, which is an eye-opener for us. But this comes as a very big challenge for us as communicators and media practitioners because we don't deal only with one variable here. There are very many variables in play. Like in the workplace, of course, what comes into account is the kind of upbringing that each individual brings into the workplace that comes with the values and all that, and also with the policies within the network. All of this come into play. So this comes as a very big challenge for us because I think the challenge here is not only absorbing the knowledge, but actually making this knowledge a second nature to us. Na every time we come up with the material, we have this consciousness already to edit the stories in a slang that is gender friendly and all that. But when you're in the reality of a workplace, fast-paced na, when you're faced with deadlines, sometimes nakakalimutan natin yun, we forget about these kinds of values that we learn. And then there's also the challenge of dealing with bosses. Like for example, when you're in a place already or in a position, then you have a voice but you don't have exactly the power to exercise or impose changes. Like for example, we have a client and this client is a big source of income for the network. So, syempre, that client has a say on what is visually appealing for them. Like for example, they want visually appealing women for their hosts to host the program. So who are we to question that? It's always the interplay of balancing the income for the network and also the welfare of the workers. It's really very intricate, it's very difficult. So the challenge here is how do we as communicators not only give a gender sensitive message, but within the workplace itself, how do we practice and actually voice out and make into action what we are learning here? So that's a very big challenge for us.
Very, very good question, and yes, you're right. And I think probably one caveat that we need to mention is it's not a day-to-night process. It's not going to change after this meeting. Now everything's going to be gender responsive, even in our work at New Women. We struggle, we face every day issues, we discuss, we question ourselves, we look at what we did, and then we try to come up with a better outcome for the next time. But there's also the reality that as communication professionals, where we sit and where we stand, we have the capacity to influence the final products. We have the capacity to produce a first draft that is already somehow gender sensitive, that it's already inclusive of women's voices, of women's opinions, that it's already respectful of women's and men's differences. So I think what matters here is that we bring those, we take this step by step. And it's not day to night. We will start a process where we can, eventually, and hopefully, and again, this is why I mentioned review and assess and analyze your content, because the more you do that, the better you will be able to actually, reorganize how you communicate and repurpose it and make sure that it's more gender responsive every day, more and more. So my advice in general is it's not an easy path. We didn't say it was easy. It's not easy for anyone, but it is a path worth going through, and it's definitely something that we need to start doing, and we need to start doing more often as we work in communications, and then as we have, as Professor Tess mentioned this morning, we have a responsibility as both government officials and UN officials to deliver for the people, to serve the people that we are working with, to make sure that this our work, which is communications, is inclusive, respectful, gender responsive, and so on. So I think this is a bit of a reflection, but yes, definitely valid question, and it's a process. Again, it's a long process, takes time, it's not easy, but it's definitely important, definitely worth going through. I don't know if my colleagues want to.
Building on what Diego said, no? So I'm building on what you said, that we also have the power to influence. But siguro what I can share is the community organizing principles on how to actually influence. Because syempre meron tayong mga advocates na, di ba? Then meron tayong mga neutral. And then yung mga talagang mga resistant to whatever we're saying. So in community organizing, and kunyari yung client na yun, they always come into the table as a group, di ba? Not as a single person. And a practical approach would be to identify who are the advocates. Tapos the neutral people that we could influence into, uy ma'am, hindi na uso yan ngayon. Di ba? We could also say to them, this is what the study says, that more the Gen Zs and the millennials are very short now. They won't buy into Gen Z. They won't buy into the products who promote sexism, di ba? That promote sexism, gender discrimination, homophobia. So that's one practical way of negotiating that space where we feel that we don't have a say in what we're doing.
You touch on a very important point. This is not only the right thing to do, by the way, and this is something that we sometimes forget. It also makes sense, and you touch on this very good point. Our audiences, more and more, Tricia mentioned this in the presentation, the majority of people who is on social media is Gen Zs and young millennials, and they speak the language of gender equality. They know, they understand, they respect, and they follow those values and those morals. So if we, not only we're going to do this, we're going to embark on becoming more gender responsive because it's the right thing to do, but also because it makes sense. It will make our communications more popular, if you like. And at the end of the day, what we want is for people to see, to read, to appreciate what we are producing as communicators. So it makes sense, not only from a human rights perspective, but also from an audience perspective. So very good points. Thank you for raising that. And I think with this, we end our time for now, and we will have a second part in the afternoon. But I think now it's lunchtime, so thank you very much.
Gusto nila yung organic. Ayaw nila yung... Kasi real eh. Ayaw na nilang tumanupay. Gusto na lang tumanupay.
Ayaw na tumanong kasi ayaw. If hindi ka gagawin yung cellphone ka pala.
Gusto nila gagawin. Hindi actually gagawin ka.
Ito pa yung cellphone.
Kailangan nakahiga ka ng pasay.
Tapos mukha lang normal.
Dami ko namang page.
Oo, ang dami ba?
Hindi ko nga.
Yung kapatid ka pa na rin.
Meron pa akong 31 M pa.
Ginamit mo, di ba, nag-invest ka na gamit ang daming definition. Tapos na rin, ako Hindi ako makapag-ano. Hindi ako sinabi ni isip ko. Nakapag-join naman na ako. Kaya hindi ko alam. Parang tapos ang lalabas, kailangan mag-sign in ako sa personal account.
Wait, i-change ko ngayon kasi baka hindi siya pwede in person. Baka siya ayusin. Parang clear energy.
Oo, ang dami di ba?
Tunog na lang.
Wala lang kasi yung makeup picture.
Ay, political page. Ay, politics page.
Nagdagdag ka ba? Nagdagdag ka na account. Sa'yo yun? First people.
End of the hall. Enjoy your lunch.
Ma'am Lita Aquino, maraming salamat. Leonardo Ansel, thank you so much. Alright guys, ano na po, lunch na po namin ngayon. At ito po ay napakahaba po ng pila, no?
Hindi mo na daw